Welcome to this lecture on international trade and world economic system. What this topic seeks to do is to try and explain how we interact with the rest of the world through international trade and finance, and how economic decisions of other countries tend to affect us, and how ours also could affect other countries. So these are the lesson objectives. At the end of the lesson, you should be able to know why nations trade with one another, identify advantages of free trade, explain why nations restrict trade and tools used in doing so, appreciate the various components of balance of payments accounts of a country, and relate balance of payments, disequilibrium, and currency fluctuations. We'll start off by looking at international trade. Why do countries trade with one another? There are two main reasons why they do this. One has to do with an even distribution of natural resources. There are some countries that have resource A but not B, and another country will have resource B but not A. So when it comes to the production of goods, sometimes you need these materials from different, you need different materials in order to produce a commodity, and if one country doesn't have these resources, they need to buy it from others. Then another factor, another reason why nations trade has to do with technology. Sometimes you may have the natural resources to produce a good, but you may not have the technology. Therefore, those who have the technology may have to go and buy. Some countries may have the technology, but they may not have the natural resources. Others may also have the natural resources, but not the technology. So those who have the technology may have to go and buy the raw materials from other places in order to produce goods and services. And those who don't have the technology in turn have to buy the finished goods from those who have been able to manufacture it. So these are the two main reasons why nations engage in trade. Because of this issue of uneven distribution of natural resources, some countries that are better endowed of a resource can use it to produce commodities cheaper than other countries. And these differences in prices of goods as a result of resource endowment creates opportunities for people to make profit by buying from low price market and selling it in high price market. And that is what brings about trade, because trade is all about buying goods from low price market and selling them in high price market in order to make profit. And these differences in cost of production, and for that matter the price of the commodities, is as a result of the resource endowment. Those that are abundantly endowed tend to produce at a lower cost. There are a lot of theories about international trade. We can talk about absolute cost advantage theory and comparative cost advantage theory. Those are concepts that are beyond the scope of this course, but it's important to point out that one of the main reasons that underpin international trade has to do with comparative cost advantage. And the comparative advantage simply says that countries must specialize in the production of commodities in which they have a comparative advantage, after which they can trade with one another. When countries trade with one another, there are certain benefits they stand to gain. Research has shown that countries that open up to international trade tend to develop faster. Their economies tend to grow faster. They move from low income to higher income status as a result of international trade. It also enlarges a country's consumption capabilities. As a country, you may not have the ability to produce certain goods, but because of international trade, you can buy those commodities from other places and come and enjoy. For instance, mobile phones. In Ghana, you don't have any company that produces mobile phone as such, but we are all using mobile phone because other countries have produced it, and international trade has allowed us to go and buy those commodities and bring them home for our use. You see a lot of the modern gadgets around us. Most of them are not produced here, but because of international trade, we now have the benefit to enjoy them. Assuming there is no international trade and we live in our own world, you could just imagine the consumption possibilities that will be available to us. So international trade allows countries to consume a variety of commodities that they themselves are not capable of producing. And so international trade also allows countries access to scarce resources. And when they produce the outputs, sometimes your market alone cannot absorb the output, so you need to sell it to other countries. So international trade creates that bigger market. Take for instance a country like Singapore. It's a very small country, but they are a big player in the world. Why? Because when they produce the goods, they sell it in other countries. So other countries have become a good market for their goods. Now, another advantage about international trade is that factor incomes tend to narrow. For instance, somebody is working in Ghana as a medical doctor. Then another person working in America as a medical doctor. No, let's use another example here. Let's say somebody is a factory worker in Ghana here, and another person is also a factory worker in Japan. Definitely, the income of people who work in Japan will be higher than those who work in Ghana here. You see, as countries trade, the prices of goods in which they trade will also adjust. Let's say a commodity in Ghana costs 10 cedis, or let's say $10. Then the same commodity in another country is $70. You will realize that if these two commodities are of the same quality, then it will be better for the country that is domestically producing this commodity and selling it at 70 to come to Ghana and buy. So as they come to Ghana to buy the goods that are being produced at $10, the demand for the goods in Ghana will rise. And as the demand rises, the price will also rise. And as the price rises, the income of those who produce these goods will also rise. What will happen is that because the people have abandoned the buying of the goods in their country and coming to Ghana, the price of the goods, the price of that particular good in their country will begin to decrease. Because one, people are not going to be buying it because it's expensive and they are coming for the Ghanaian one. And because Ghanaian one is so cheap, when it goes there, it's going to be sold at a price lower than what prevails domestically over there. And you see, if you are producing a commodity and the price at which you sell the commodity the price of the commodity is falling, those who produce the commodity will experience reduction in income. So whilst those abroad who produce this commodity in their domestic market at $70 will be experiencing a reduction in their income. People who produce this commodity at $10 in Ghana will begin to experience increase in their income. So whilst income in Ghana is rising for the producers of that commodity, the income of those who produce it abroad will be decreasing. And if international trade continues, income of those who produce the commodity in Ghana will begin to rise, will continue to rise, whilst that of the other country will begin to diminish. So this will continue until the two become equal. So international trade that you don't need to travel from one country to another in order to earn good income as those over there. International trade can give you that. For instance, if you take a lot of commodities in Ghana, domestically they may not be expensive, but as they are exported, they attract higher prices over there. So those who produce those commodities here tend to earn higher income. International trade also allows countries to produce on very large scale so that they can sell in other countries. And as you produce on very large scale, the cost per unit tends to fall. And that is what we call economies of scale. When you produce commodities on very large scale, it tends to, the average cost per unit tends to fall. And this huge quantity of goods produced could be sold in other markets beyond the domestic market. So international trade allows that. As you have said, international trade provides larger market for small countries. Take a country like Singapore. It's a very small country. Hong Kong, Taiwan. These are all small countries. But international trade allows them to have access to bigger markets, and they can produce and sell in all these markets. International trade is also noted for promoting harmonious relationship between countries. You see, when there is chaos, countries cannot trade. Therefore, if you want to trade with somebody, you try and do whatever it takes for peaceful coexistence to exist. And once there is peace, countries can trade easily with one another. So international trade allows, also promotes peaceful coexistence, that kind of harmonious, symbiotic relationship between countries of the world. Despite the fact that trade, and for that matter free trade, is good for everybody, what we see in the real world is that countries try all kinds of means to restrict international trade. So we're talking about trade restrictions, which in some books you see protectionism. Why is it that some countries don't allow free trade? Why? There are various reasons that have been advanced as to why countries restrict international trade. And the basic one is infant industry argument. When the country is first established, when the industry is first established, it will be unable to compete with the already well-established ones in other countries. For this reason, the domestically established young industries need some kind of protection. For instance, if you put Azuma Nelson and Mike Tyson into the boxing ring to fight, because they are not of equal size and weight, one will beat the other mercilessly. So the two cannot compete. So it's the same way with international trade. There are some companies that have been in business for hundreds of years. So if you are coming in as a young producer, you cannot compete. You cannot compete directly with those well-established companies. So you need some kind of protection, and governments use all kinds of tools to protect domestic industries against foreign competition. Then the second one has to do with infant government argument. Yeah, in many developing countries, these countries are young, and they have a lot of developmental challenges which require a lot of money. So countries tend to impose a lot of restrictions on goods, especially tariffs on imported goods, so that they can generate revenue for development. For instance, if you go to Aplau border or Tema Harbour or Takoradi ports, you see a lot of taxes being imposed on goods in order to get money for the government. So government also, because of revenue reasons, may restrict international trade. International trade can also create problems in the domestic economy, especially import competing sectors. So what I mean over here is that international trade can create unemployment in a country. For instance, in Ghana, we have heard a lot about how the textile industry used to flourish in the past, and the huge number of people that were employed in the manufacturing of textile in Ghana. But because of free trade and we have seen what has happened, most of the textile companies have collapsed. So in order to protect such jobs domestically, countries try to put obstacles in the way of free trade and international trade so that domestic jobs can be protected. Then national security reasons. Countries also restrict international trade for national security reasons. The argument is that if you depend too much on other countries and those countries face crisis for which they cannot supply to you, then it will put your country in danger. We also what happened during the COVID period, when we could not get certain goods from other countries because of the COVID. And if those are essential commodities, it can put the country's economy in danger, which can spark crisis. Imagine Ghana depends so much on China over food imports, and there's a crisis in China, which means that we cannot get the food we used to get from that place. How do you think will happen? There will be crisis home because food prices will begin to escalate, especially if you cannot get it easily from another place, and hunger can even set in. So in order to protect the country against those kind of situations, local businesses are protected and encouraged so that we don't become too over-reliant on other countries. Then we can also talk about market failure argument. Then we can also talk about anti-dumping arguments. What do you mean by anti-dumping argument? You see, some countries can produce commodities at a certain cost, but they will go and sell it in another country below their cost of production. The idea is to go and destroy their competitors abroad, so that when those competitors are destroyed, then those foreign companies can come and take over their markets. So countries also put measures in place to prevent that from happening. So that is what we call anti-dumping. Then income redistribution. One of the objectives of government is to redistribute income and wealth in a country. Usually, it is people who are well-to-do who tend to buy a lot of manufactured goods from outside. For instance, laptops, cars, iPhones, and the rest. So government can use trade restriction as a way of redistributing income from these rich people to the poor people. So if you go to the port, you see if you are bringing a car to Ghana, you have to pay so much tax. It's a way of the government taking money from those who have money so that they can spend it on the less privileged. For instance, free education. Taxes from those kind of goods, taxes on those goods could be used to finance free education for ordinary people also to benefit from. So it is a way of redistributing income from rich consumers to low income people. There are various ways by which government restricts international trade. So we'll briefly talk about types of trade barriers. The commonest of all the trade barriers is what we call import tariffs. These are taxes that are imposed on goods when they are coming to a country at the ports or the entry points. So harbor, borders, land borders, the airport, and the harbor and the rest. So when the good is coming and it reaches there before it can move into the country, some taxes will be imposed on the good. And when the taxes are imposed on the goods, it makes the goods more expensive. And we all know that the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. So when the imported goods are taxed, it makes them more expensive. And as they become more expensive, their demand will fall. So once their demand falls, it means that a lot more of it cannot be brought into the country. So that is how a country can restrict international trade by import tariffs. The import tariffs are of two types: the specific tax and the ad valorem tax. The specific tax is just a lump sum per unit of a commodity. Let's say you are bringing 50 kilogram rice to Ghana. You see, when you are bringing this rice from different countries, the commodities will have different values because the cost of production is not the same everywhere in the world. But so specific tax will just be, if you are bringing 50 kilogram rice to Ghana, no matter where you are bringing it from, you pay, for instance, 5 cedis per bag. That is what we mean by specific tax. But when we talk about ad valorem tax, you pay a given percentage, a fixed percentage of the value of the commodity. What it means is that if 50 kilogram rice is coming from different countries with different prices, but the government imposes, let's say, 10% ad valorem tax, the taxes that will be paid on this commodity will not be the same for the rice coming from every country, because the tax will be based on the value of the rice. And since the rice is coming from different places, it will not have the same price. And that is ad valorem tax. Then we can also talk about import quotas. The import quotas specify the maximum amounts of commodity which may be imported in any period of time. Let's say Ghana, our demand for chicken is 100 metric tons, but the country can only produce 40 metric tons. What it means is that we have to import 60 metric tons. So the government can decide to introduce a quota for importation of chicken to the tune of 60 metric tons. It means that the country can only import up to the maximum of 60 metric tons of chicken. Once that 60 metric tons is achieved, you can no longer import beyond that 60 metric tons. And that is what we mean by import quota. So the import quota limits how much a country can import at a given period of time. Then we can also talk about subsidies. Subsidies are usually subsidies is the reverse of a tax, and usually subsidies are imposed on domestically produced goods. The overall idea is to make them cheaper. If you make domestically produced goods cheaper, people will shift away from buying imported goods towards domestic goods. And as the demand for domestic goods increases, demand for foreign ones will fall. So that will reduce how much goods that are imported into the country. So subsidies essentially are given to domestically produced goods so that they become cheaper for people to buy. And this will switch people from buying imported goods towards buying domestically produced goods. Then we can also talk about exchange controls. The exchange control is a situation where a country restricts how much it imports to how much it exports. What happens under exchange control is that when companies export, they generate foreign currency, and the government will buy these foreign currencies. And when people also want to import, they have to buy these foreign currencies from the government, usually through the central bank. So how much you can import will be limited to how much a country has also exported. So this is to ensure that we don't import more than we export. So if export is 10 billion, import cannot be more than 10 billion. At worst, you can only import up to how much you have exported. and that is exchange control. So all these are designed to, all these are tools the country can use to restrict how much goods flow into their country. I think we'll put a break here and continue later. Thank you.